Have you ever realized how much energy we waste just trying to explain ourselves to people who don't actually care? Take a moment and reflect. How many times have you had to justify your choices, defend your dreams, or wait for someone's permission to pursue what your heart truly desires? Let me make this clear. Every second you spend trying to prove your worth to others is the second you lose the chance to move forward. It's time to stop. Everything begins to change the moment you turn your focus inward, because success doesn't come from promises, nor does it come from convincing others that you're capable. It comes from action, from discipline, from showing up day after day to do what must be done, even when no one is watching. Many people don't get what they want, not because they lack ability, but because they're too easily pulled away by the noise out there. They let the stories on social media derail their journey. They allow the stares and judgments of others to influence their personal decisions. And then, at the end of the day, they feel drained, stuck, and barely any further from where they started. But the truth is this: when you start removing what's unnecessary, when you stop explaining, stop seeking approval, and focus only on what truly matters, you become an unstoppable version of yourself. Because success, in the end, doesn't need to be loud. It is built in the quiet of early mornings when the world is still asleep. It grows with each decision you make, to act rather than seek validation, to continue even when no one applauds. You don't need an audience. You don't need permission. What you need is consistency. And it is in that deep focus on growth, on learning, on disciplining yourself every single day that you will begin to see the world around you change. Better opportunities will come. The right decisions will feel easier to make. And most importantly, confidence will no longer come from others, but from the living proof you create through your own action. Why do we often feel exhausted, discouraged, even lost, despite the fact that nothing particularly terrible seems to be happening? Because most of the time, our minds are not living in the present, nor are they living for ourselves. They're pulled away by trivial things, unconscious reactions, and people who contribute nothing to our personal growth. You worry about who said what about you, who is doing better, who's getting more attention. You reach for your phone every morning before even taking a sip of water and get swept into the vortex of news, social media, and matters that have nothing to do with your own life. In that very moment, you've already handed control of your day to someone else. And then you wonder why you feel empty? The truth is, your energy is leaking, bit by bit, not from anything monumental, but from the small things you fail to take control of. Success doesn't begin with a grand plan. It begins with one clear decision: to focus on yourself. Focus is not selfishness. It is the highest act of self-respect. It is the commitment that you will not trade your future for temporary comfort, that you will no longer build your life upon the shaky foundation of others' validation. When you begin to turn inward, quietly, resolutely, and with discipline, you'll find that the things which once caused you anxiety suddenly become meaningless. People talk? Let them. You no longer react because you've come to understand reacting is how we hand over control of our emotions to someone else, and you are no longer willing to do that. Transformation begins when you stop chasing perfection in others' eyes and start acting according to the standards you set for yourself. When you no longer seek praise or approval, you become free. Free to fail, to learn, to try again, to grow without needing applause. And it is within that freedom that you step into the most profound phase of your life. You become the one who takes full responsibility for your own path. That's when everything begins to align. Every small action you take, whether it's just 10 focused minutes of reading, 15 minutes of silent meditation, or saying no to a meaningless social invitation, each one is shaping a new you, a version no longer dictated by the outside world, but built from within. Steady, calm, and dependable. Look around you. How many people are truly living up to their full potential? Not many, because most people are too busy trying to appear reasonable in the eyes of society. They live to please their parents, their bosses, their friends, strangers on the internet, and sometimes outdated versions of themselves. But you are different. You are stepping out of that loop. You are learning to stop talking about what you are going to do and actually start doing it in silence, with discipline, and with a persistent belief that if I stay true to myself, the results will speak for themselves. You don't need to broadcast your transformation. A tree doesn't need to shout to be noticed. It simply reaches for the light every day. And then at some point, no one can deny its strong and unwavering presence. The journey of focusing on yourself is not easy because it requires you to face the truth that every excuse you've ever given, from lack of time, lack of motivation, to lack of support, was just a shell masking your fear. But the moment you dare to strip that shell away, you realize you're far stronger than you ever thought. You don't need others to believe in you first. You just need to believe in yourself. Believe enough to begin, to make mistakes, to persist, and to keep going even when no one claps for you. And then, step by step, through each temptation you resist, through each conscious choice you make, you accumulate a turning point. Focus is not a mood, it's a habit. It's what you do every day, regardless of how you feel. It's how you protect what matters by saying no to what no longer aligns. It's how you reset the standard for every hour of your day, not a string of reactions, but a series of conscious decisions. And then you'll realize confidence is no longer something you need to search for. It's something you build through action, through repetition, through keeping your promises to yourself even when no one else sees. When you do that, you no longer need anyone to validate your worth. The results will do that for you. Your eyes will be different, your energy will be different, and the world, sooner or later, will have to change the way it sees you. When you begin to focus on yourself, something strange happens. You realize that most of your past exhaustion didn't come from work, but from unnecessary interactions. Every meaningless argument, every attempt to explain your thoughts to someone who isn't listening, every moment you react to things that don't matter, these are all leaks of energy you don't even notice. It's not productive busyness, but purposeless depletion. And if you don't consciously cut off those drains, you will always feel like you're running without getting far, making effort without seeing results. That's because your energy, your most precious resource, is being scattered by things that have nothing to do with the path you're on. Once you realize this, you begin to change not only how you live, but how you think. You no longer react automatically to everything. You choose to respond deliberately. Not everything that happens deserves your reaction. Not everyone who says something deserves your attention. Not every conversation requires your presence. True maturity begins when you realize silence is the choice of the strong, not the passive. It is the power of those who know their worth and don't need to shout to prove it. Protecting your energy doesn't mean withdrawing from the world. It is a courageous act by those who understand. Not everyone deserves your time and mental space. You become more selective, not out of arrogance, but out of awareness. You realize you cannot go far if you're constantly being pulled into unhealthy dialogues, relationships that don't nurture your spirit, or negative thought patterns from your environment. And when you begin to choose decisively and consistently, you are not only protecting yourself, but also creating a new space where things of true value begin to appear. Indeed, transformation never comes from the outside. It begins within, from how you speak to yourself, how you spend each minute of your day, and from the small choices you repeat with persistence. You begin to understand. You don't need approval. You only need action. And that action, no matter how small, when carried out with discipline, generates a force no external power can stop. Not words, not promises, but sustained action in silence is the clearest declaration of what you are living for. You don't need to announce every time you start something new. You don't need to share your plans with the world to feel committed. On the contrary, the quieter you are, the more energy you preserve for action, because when you talk about what you haven't done, you're satisfying yourself with a false sense of accomplishment. Scientific studies show when you publicly declare a goal without acting on it, you get a sense of satisfaction as if you've already done it. But that's an illusion. That feeling deceives you. And then you grow lazy, you slow down, you procrastinate, when in fact you should hold your silence like a quiet source of motivation. Let every step you take be a form of commitment, not for others to see, but for yourself to know, I'm doing this for me. Silence is not a gap in communication. It is a powerful statement. A personal affirmation that says, I don't need to respond to everything. I don't need to defend myself against every judgment. I don't need to prove my choices are valid in someone else's eyes. Because in this life, the only reason you need to be valid is to your own conscience and purpose. When you live with clarity inside, you no longer need agreement from the outside. And when you guard your energy from distractions, you will see your effectiveness in action increase beyond imagination. No longer startled by negative news, no longer wasting hours in valueless conversations, no longer exhausted from constantly trying to please others. Instead, you'll feel a new flow of energy emerge, strong, profound, and deeply still, guiding you step by step toward where you're meant to go. When you learn to preserve your energy, you begin to see the world more clearly. The things that used to shake you no longer move you. The people who once made you doubt yourself are now just faint echoes in the distance. Not because they changed, but because you did. You're no longer resonating at the same frequency. You're no longer in rooms filled with doubt. You've built yourself a new world, where focus is the center, discipline is the foundation, and silence is the strategy. This is a world where success doesn't need to be declared, because it will shine on its own. Focus is not just something you do, it is something you protect. Your mind in its quietest state is the fertile ground where the seeds of action are sown. But what happens if that soil is constantly attacked by weeds, negative thoughts, comparisons, unsolicited judgments from others? You cannot plant anything of value in a chaotic space. That's why you must become the guardian of your own thoughts. Not everything that appears in your mind deserves to be nurtured, and not everyone who enters your life deserves to stay. We often underestimate the impact of the mental environment surrounding us. A negative post on social media, a sarcastic conversation, an unexpected comment from a stranger. It may seem insignificant, but it all leaves a trace. Every time you allow a piece of negative news to take up space in your mind, you are slowly building a reality you never asked for. And then you wonder why you're so prone to anxiety, self-doubt, and discouragement, even before you've begun. The answer lies in how lenient you've been with what you permit to exist in your thoughts. Understand this. You have far more control over your reality than you think, not by trying to control the world, but by carefully choosing where you place your attention. Your mind is like a lens. It will magnify whatever you focus on. If you focus on what you don't have, you will feel lack. If you obsess over others' success without understanding their journey, you will feel inferior. But if you learn to turn that lens inward, to focus on each step of progress, each act of daily discipline, you will begin to see yourself moving forward, steadily and with purpose. The amazing thing is that the human brain cannot distinguish between reality and imagination, between what has already happened and what you keep thinking about. Your nervous system sees more of whatever you repeat in your thoughts. That's why what you constantly think about will shape your behavior, your reactions, and even your results. If you believe you're undisciplined, you'll act accordingly. If you think you're not as good as others, you'll shrink yourself. But if you plant in your mind the image of someone strong, committed, self-directed, and full of purpose, you'll start behaving like that person. And over time, you become that person. Not because someone told you that you're worthy, but because you silently rebuilt your self-picture through small actions, through daily choices. You can begin rewiring your mindset with simple steps. Limit your time on social media. Carefully select what you read, watch, and listen to each day. And spend a few minutes every morning writing down what you're grateful for, what you're striving toward, and what you commit to doing today. Each of these actions is like a small brick, seemingly insignificant. But if you persistently lay one after another, you will build a fortress inside your mind, a place no one can reach to pull you down. Your mind doesn't need to be a battlefield of doubt, fear, or distraction. It can be a quiet field where you plant seeds and see goodness blossom every day. Alongside your mind, your living environment also needs restructuring. You cannot live with discipline in a space that constantly reminds you of procrastination. You cannot grow in relationships where you must constantly defend yourself. Take a look at the room you're in, the people you frequently talk to, even the sounds you're exposed to every day. All of them are subtly directing your energy, and if you're not fully aware, you'll be influenced by your environment without even realizing it. Be bold enough to cleanse. Be courageous enough to remove anything that no longer serves the person you're striving to become. Don't hold on to a relationship just because you're afraid of being misunderstood. Don't continue an old lifestyle just because you're afraid of change. Don't remain in a cluttered space just because it's familiar. Every clear choice is a declaration that you are respecting yourself. And when you respect yourself, the world will have to adjust the way it treats you. No one can rebuild your life but you. And that process doesn't start with trying to control everything outside. It begins with strictly filtering what you allow to enter inside. When you do that, you will see confidence no longer comes from how many big things you've accomplished, but from how many small things you've mastered. You will see motivation is no longer something you have to go looking for, but something you generate every morning when you choose to keep your mental space clean. And then day by day, you get closer to the strongest version of yourself, a person who not only lives with awareness, but lives with intention, with boundaries, and with an inner strength that cannot be shaken. There is a crucial stage in the journey of growth that you cannot avoid. The moment when you must act without anyone watching, without anyone acknowledging, without anyone cheering you on. No words of comfort, no nods of approval, no compliments. Just you with yourself, in silence, in solitude, in moments no one else sees, but that completely determine who you will become. And it is in those very moments that discipline, the seemingly rigid force, reveals its true essence. It is the unwavering trust you give yourself that, no matter the circumstances, you will still show up, still do what needs to be done, still refuse to betray the person you are striving so hard to become. We live in an area where noise is prioritized over depth. People pay attention to those who speak the most, show off the most, appear the most. Yet the irony is, those who create real impact are often the ones who act more than they speak. They build in silence, adjust in silence, withdraw from useless conversations to make space for what matters. They understand this. You don't need to announce every time you begin something. You just need to begin. You don't need to declare every time you change. You just need to change. And let the results speak for the rest. When you do this long enough, one day, people will notice that you've changed, not because you said it, but because your presence becomes too undeniable to ignore. There is a quiet beauty in silent consistency. When you begin to act for yourself rather than for others' approval, you cross into a new threshold of growth. You begin to understand that the reward is not in external glamour, but in the respect you grant yourself every time you keep your word. No one may know how many temptations you've resisted, how many moments you wanted to quit, how many times you longed to go back to the easier road. But you know. And that is what makes all the difference. Silent persistence creates a quiet force that is immensely powerful. It pushes you out of your comfort zone, out of stagnation, out of an outdated lifestyle that no longer aligns with where you're going. Discipline is not just about waking up early, working hard, or saying no to entertainment. It is a way of life. It is integrity with yourself. It is keeping your mind clear, your actions intentional, and your values intact. Not because someone is watching, but because you understand. It is the repetition done in silence that will rewrite the entire story of your life. And remember, no one is coming to save you. No one has the time to notice every small effort you make. There is no audience in the journey of true growth. There's only you, with your discipline, your perseverance, your decision to repeat the right actions, until results are no longer something you chase, but something you rightfully earn. And then one day you will look back at the version of yourself today and feel grateful that you didn't quit. Grateful for the mornings you didn't hit snooze, for the times you said no to comfort, for the days you didn't post anything online but quietly did the work, for the weeks no one checked on you, but you still kept showing up to train, study, and improve, because it is in those very moments, the ones unnoticed, uncelebrated, unpraised, that the true foundation is laid for everything you are building. And believe me, you will get to where you want to go. If you are persistent enough to walk without a guide, bold enough to act without applause, quiet enough to keep the fire alive without the need for fireworks. Because real success doesn't need to be declared. It only requires someone who is quiet enough, long enough, deep enough, and true enough. If you are that person, don't stop. If you are in that process, don't doubt. And if you haven't begun yet, then today is the first day. There is something few people dare to admit. Most of the disappointment in life does not come from a lack of ability, but from a misdefinition of success. We are taught that success is something to be chased, to be earned through effort, to be proven through visible accomplishments. And so we begin to run for achievements, for recognition, for fleeting praise. We run so fast we forget the true reason we started. We forget that success is not a finish line to reach, but a natural result of living rightly, consistently, and with depth. A person who lives with discipline, with focus, with honesty toward themselves, does not need to achieve success, because success, in its truest definition, will find that person on its own. No need for struggle, no need for comparison, no need for competition. It comes as a sincere response from life to those who persist in living with integrity. It's not measured by noise, but by steadiness, not by the number of followers you have, but by the quality of the hours you live. Not by what you own, but by the person you become in the process of owning it. Imagine yourself walking through a forest of noise. Everyone is talking, performing, demanding attention. But you choose silence. You choose to walk steadily, not in a rush. You choose to act without announcing. You choose to focus on each step, each decision, each small habit. You don't follow the crowd, don't feel the need to do it fast or make it flashy. You only need to do it right. And the beautiful thing is, when you live this way long enough, that very silence becomes magnetic. That very focus becomes value. Without saying a word, you draw attention. Without racing, you go further, because you understand that results are not conjured from flashy breakthroughs. They come from what you repeat in silence, from choosing each morning not to reach for your phone, from choosing to read instead of scroll, from sitting down to work when no one asked you to. Success doesn't come from one grand act, but from 1,000 small right actions, done persistently without show. It is accumulation. It is the compound effect. It is the natural result of a life lived without compromise. And if you do your part right, the result cannot not show up. And then you realize another truth. You no longer need to control the outcome, because you are already in control of something more important, the way you live. You are managing your thoughts each day, choosing responses over reactions, protecting your environment to keep your energy clean, taking ownership of your time so you no longer live like someone being swept away. And when you can control all of that, you no longer worry about results. You no longer ask, when will I succeed? Because you already know I am living like someone who is successful, not because others say so, but because I can feel it within myself. And then when good things come, opportunities, people, results, you are no longer surprised because you know they didn't come from luck. They are a result. They are life's response to your consistency. You no longer feel fear when things don't go your way because you don't define yourself by temporary wins or losses. You don't measure your worth by fluctuating numbers. You measure yourself by this. Did I live rightly today? Did I keep my commitments? Did I choose better than I did yesterday? And if the answer is yes, then you have already succeeded more than most of the world. True success doesn't come from the outside, but from within. It is not something you harvest. It is something you become. Not the one with more money, more fame, more power is necessarily more successful. Some people have all of that and still feel empty. Others have none of it and still sleep peacefully every night, knowing they're living with meaning. And you are the one who gets to choose which side to be on, to choose whether you will merely appear successful or truly live aligned with your best, most honest self. To do that, you must be steady enough to walk without trumpets. You must be humble enough to let results arrive when they are ready. You must be mature enough not to let your ego demand everything be done now, because you understand what comes quickly often doesn't last. What lasts always arrives slowly. But what comes from your true self stays forever. There's a kind of presence that requires no introduction, a kind of strength that needs no proving, a kind of person who walks into a room and can be felt, not because they try to make an impression, but because they are simply themselves, clear, grounded, and free from the need for validation. These are the people who have learned to let action speak instead of words. People who don't need to talk about their efforts because their steadiness says it all. People who don't need to declare they've changed. Because standing before them, you can sense the growth radiating from their eyes, their voice, and the unshakable calm with which they face the chaos of the world. This is the level reached by those who have embraced a simple truth. You don't have to say who you are when your energy already makes it undeniably clear. We live in a world where everyone wants to be heard, seen, and known. Presence seems to be measured by engagement metrics, by shares, by noise. But that same world is growing more and more exhausted from trying too hard to be noticed, from chasing a version of worth defined by others, from proving oneself through every photo, every quote, every updated achievement. And yet, amid all that noise, the most valuable thing is silence. The ability to take a step back, not from weakness, but from no longer needing to prove anything. The calm confidence that says, I don't need others to believe in me in order to act. I don't need applause to know I'm on the right path. I only need one thing, that I myself know exactly what I'm doing and why. Silence is not weakness. It is the ultimate display of inner strength. When you are silent, it's not because you don't know what to say, but because you know when it matters to speak. When you don't react, it's not because you don't feel, but because you've chosen not to let emotions dictate your direction. When you don't share your plans, it's not because you lack vision, but because you understand that the most meaningful plans must be guarded by silence, nurtured through action, and allowed to speak through results. Because if you need to use words to convince others that you're on the right track, it may be that you haven't fully convinced yourself. But when you stay silent and continue walking day by day with steady steps, eventually no one will need an explanation because the results will answer everything. People may doubt what you say, but they cannot doubt what you create. They may argue with your opinions, but they cannot deny the energy that radiates from someone who lives right, lives true, and lives deeply. And that can only happen when you dare to walk the quiet path, when you dare to live as though no one is watching, yet act as if you're writing the pages of your life story each day and want every page to be worth rereading. When you let your energy speak for your character, your discipline, your resilience, when you allow each small act to be living proof of the values you're forging within. And that is something you cannot fake. Energy doesn't lie. You can imitate words, but you cannot imitate presence. You can play the part of confidence, but you cannot fake peace when you're alone. You can use language to build an image, but if you don't live that image every day, the inauthenticity will reveal itself in the quiet moments. The world may be drawn to the surface, but only what is real keeps people there. And you know what? You don't need to do anything grand to have an impact. You only need to live truthfully, persistently, quietly, and you will inspire those who are searching for the same. In a world that rushes, the one who slows down leads. In a society that talks too much, the one who remains silent holds true power. So begin to practice speaking less and doing more. Fewer declarations, more execution. Less comparison, more focus. Let every time you show up be a moment others feel your depth, not your noise. Let every result you achieve be a quiet reminder that silence is not stagnation, but the quiet construction of something so powerful it will soon leave others speechless. And remember, you don't need everyone to understand you right away. You only need to be consistent enough that they can't ignore you when the time comes. One day you will be asked, "How did you do it?" And you'll simply smile, because you'll know deep down you didn't speak too much, but you stayed long enough, stayed true enough, stayed deep enough for good things to find you. No need for proving, no need for debating, no need to stand out. Just keep living right, and the world naturally will listen. There comes a point in your journey of personal growth when you no longer need motivational videos each morning. You don't need someone pushing you from behind, don't need reminders to keep trying, because you, deep within, have become your own most sustainable source of motivation, not because you always feel excited, but because you've learned one crucial truth. Action does not need to be accompanied by positive emotion, but by personal commitment. You begin to act not because you feel ready, but because you've chosen to be a person who takes action, tired, bored, unseen. And from that decision, you step into a whole new level, where discipline is no longer a burden, but a privilege, where persistence is no longer effort, but instinct, where you no longer have to try to live well, but simply live well, naturally and vibrantly. There is no motivation stronger than knowing your reason for being. When you know why you wake up, why you must stay disciplined, why you cannot afford to live carelessly, you won't need encouragement. You'll wake up early on your own, say no to distractions on your own, study, read, upgrade yourself, without applause, without reminders, without anyone telling you to keep going, because you understand your life is being shaped every single day by every decision, every repeated action, and if you're not leading it consciously, life will be directed by circumstances, by emotions, by fleeting impulses that, when you look back, leave only regret. Motivation from within is the only kind of motivation you can rely on for life. It doesn't come from a fiery speech, but from the nights you look in the mirror and ask, "Am I living right?" It doesn't come from successful images on social media, but from the moment you overcome a former version of yourself. It doesn't come from others' admiration, but from the respect you earn for yourself. And to build that kind of motivation, you can't live on the surface. You have to go deep. You have to confront. You have to ask yourself the tough questions. Am I living up to the standards I set for myself? Am I doing what I once committed to? Am I betraying myself? When you're brave enough to answer those questions honestly, you no longer need to be pushed. you begin to clearly see what's been holding you back, what's been wasting your precious time, what's been causing you to delay rather than act. And when you see it all, you stop avoiding. You choose to live differently, not because someone's watching, but because you can't stand to keep living halfway. You've postponed too much, lived too long for convenience, pushed dreams aside too often just because of temporary feelings. But now, you want to see yourself grow every day. You want to feel real progress. You want to build a version of yourself that is grounded, resilient, and trustworthy for your own sake. You understand that motivation doesn't always show up every morning, but discipline can. Emotions fluctuate constantly, but habits will hold you steady. There will be days when you don't want to wake up early, don't want to work, don't want to keep going, but you still do, because you don't live by your feelings, you live by the standards you set. And that is what builds inner strength. Not the strength of someone who is always fired up, but the strength of someone who keeps walking even when the fire burns low. Not a strength that comes from inspiration, but one that comes from a vow not to betray yourself. You'll come to realize you don't need to feel amazing to do the right thing. You just need to begin. And more often than not, positive emotions follow action, not the other way around. Taking action is the fastest way to rekindle motivation. Every time you overcome procrastination, you teach your brain a new lesson. I'm not who I used to be. Every right action, no matter how small, is a vote for the better version of you. When you cast that vote repeatedly, you no longer need outside motivation because you've become your own source of power. And once you reach that state, nothing can stop you. You won't be swayed by fleeting laziness, won't be distracted by others' momentary successes, won't be pulled by unnecessary noise because you know exactly what you're doing and why. You live each day with clarity. You work with focus. You keep promises to yourself, not out of obligation, but out of respect. And that is enough. Enough to take you far. Enough to keep you grounded without the need for cheers. Enough to keep you walking without losing your way. Enough to live each day as though you are the sole person responsible for everything that will happen in your life. Because in truth, you always have been. True freedom doesn't come when you have everything. It comes when you're no longer bound by the need for validation from others. It is that moment when you no longer feel the urge to prove anything to the world. You don't need to hear that you're good enough, worthy enough, or making progress. You know who you are. You know what you've been through. You are fully aware of what you are quietly building within, and that is enough. No longer swayed by others' opinions. I no longer feel compelled to share achievements just to be acknowledged. No longer needing to embellish your story to meet someone else's expectations. You live quietly, grow quietly, and strangely, that is exactly when you touch something precious that so many people are seeking, peace. We grow up in a world that constantly pushes us to stand out. From a young age, we are praised for getting high scores, admired for talent, loved when we please others, and we carry this distorted belief into adulthood that our worth must be validated externally. We live to prove ourselves. We act to impress. We assume that if no one sees it, if no one applauds, if no one approves, then what we do has no meaning. But the truth is, every great thing in this world has been built in silence. Those who truly live with depth, they don't seek applause. They seek integrity. They don't ask, do others recognize me? They ask, am I living true to myself? You could achieve everything, career, wealth, fame, but if your mind is still attached to the gaze of others, you'll never feel enough. Every judgment will make you doubt. Every compliment will make you dependent. Every silence from the outside will make you anxious. That's not success. That's an invisible prison. And unfortunately, many capable people live in it every day because they haven't dared to cut the cord that links their self-worth to public validation. But you are different. You've walked a long path to learn this. True recognition does not come from the outside. It comes from internal alignment. When you live according to what you believe, do what you've chosen, and stay true to the path you've committed to, and right at that intersection where you no longer need praise, no longer need to be understood, a quiet strength begins to rise within you. It is the strength of someone who is free. Free from expectations, free from comparison, free from the anxiety of not meeting someone else's standard. When you dare to live that way, everything begins to shift. You start choosing work not for its prestige, but for the value it creates. You connect with others not because of their status, but because of their sincerity. You dare to say no to things you once reluctantly accepted, just to be included. You dare to go against the grain if it aligns with your truth. And that is not just maturity, it is awakening. The world out there may still be noisy. People still compete to express, to grab attention. But you no longer belong to that game. You no longer feel compelled to say something, do something, share something, just to maintain an image for others. Because you know, image can impress, but it's your substance that defines who you are. And you've chosen to cultivate substance in silence, with discipline, with focus. You no longer need the world's response to feel whole. You've learned to respond to yourself every day with your progress, with your stillness, with a deep sense of satisfaction that needs no display. And when you live like that, you stop running. You walk steadily, clearly, deeply enough that everything around you has no choice but to adjust. When you no longer need recognition, you also become harder to hurt. You're not easily swayed by praise, not easily defeated by criticism. You receive everything with composure. You understand compliments or critiques are just opinions, not definitions. People have the right to perceive, and you have the right not to be governed. And that gives you an invaluable gift, inner freedom. You're no longer someone who lives based on the world's reactions. You become someone who builds your own reality, grounded, full of inner strength, awake enough to live life on your own terms, not to match anyone's expectations. The path you walk doesn't need to be understood by others. It only needs to be honored by you. Every step you take, even unseen, is bringing you closer to the person you know you can become. No certificates needed, no podiums, no cheering crowd. All you need is to know with certainty, I am living right. And if you've reached this point in your journey, know this, you have already won. Not a victory over others, but a victory over the insecurity that once made you dependent on external approval. And once you conquer that, nothing will ever be able to hold you back again. Living a meaningful life isn't about living up to someone else's standards. It's about having the courage to set your own and to stay committed to them, even when that makes you different. When you truly grow up, you stop chasing society's pre-written definitions of success. You are no longer swayed by the mainstream path that everyone says you're supposed to follow. Good grades, graduate on time, land a prestigious job, get married at the right age, buy a house, buy a car, build up your assets. Instead, you begin to look deep within and ask, how do I truly want to live? And from the moment you answer that question honestly, a new journey begins. The journey where you write every clause of your own life contract. It's easy to live by external standards. It's easy to do what the majority considers right. But that ease comes with a cost. You trade authenticity for approval. You put aside your dreams to be called stable. You quietly abandon what makes your heart come alive just to be seen as on track. And as the days go by, you slowly drift further away from your true self. That's not living. That's existing inside a version of life prepackaged by society. But you weren't born for that. You were born with your own energy, your own voice, your own direction. And if you're brave enough to step outside the crowd's comfort zone, you'll discover something. No one really knows what right means. Everyone's just searching for their own answers. So why not allow yourself to begin that search a little sooner? When you create your own standard, you'll see the world begin to shift. Not because the world has changed, but because you've changed the way you see yourself. You no longer need anyone's permission to start. You don't need encouragement to keep going. You don't need a reason to be real. You start building an internal value system, a space where your every decision no longer stems from trends, fear, or expectation, but from your personal truth. You know what aligns with you and what no longer belongs. You're no longer afraid of rejection because you understand. Whatever isn't meant for you has no rightful place on the path you are deliberately, wholeheartedly building. Setting your own standard is not stubbornness, it is awakening. Because only when you live in alignment with your chosen principles can you experience true freedom. No more forced behaviors, no more reluctant relationships, no more borrowed blueprints. Everything in your life becomes cleaner, clearer, more intentional, and deeply aligned. You stop wasting time on shallow conversations and commitments that don't elevate you. You begin to live with the mindset of someone who understands that each day is a vote, and you will only cast that vote for what truly deserves your life energy. From that space, you no longer feel pressured to succeed like others, because you've redefined success in your own terms. Maybe it's the peace you feel waking up each morning, the power to say no to anything that violates your values, the discipline to read a page each day amid life's chaos. And those small but profound things become the true foundation of a life well lived, because you are living by a standard you've created, and nothing compares to the fulfillment of living wholly within a framework you chose, refined, and take full responsibility for. Your life doesn't need to resemble anyone else's. It only needs to be honest to you. And the miracle is this: when you live authentically, you begin to meet others who do the same. When you dare to speak your truth, you draw in people who resonate with it. When you no longer live to please, you begin building relationships that help you grow. That's something money or status can't buy. It's something only created through alignment between your inner world and your action. And when things begin to connect in that way, you'll realize you don't have to fit anyone's mold, because the most beautiful, powerful, and sustainable template is the authentic version of yourself that you are quietly crafting day by day. Don't fear being different. Fear living a life that doesn't belong to you. Don't fear falling behind. Fear racing ahead without knowing where you're going. Don't fear being misunderstood. Fear never taking the time to truly understand yourself. And if today you're standing at a crossroads, one path widely accepted, the other lighting up your heart, remember this: real light never comes from convenience. It comes from the courage to choose. And that courage, you already have it within you. In the end, everything you're doing, every quiet choice, every unseen hour, every moment you turn down the easy path to choose the harder but truer one, is shaping a single outcome: the person you are becoming. Life doesn't reward the loudest voices. It saves its best for those who move quietly yet persistently, who dare to live authentically, to walk without a map, to choose lasting values over fleeting applause. No one else but you, through the way you live, is defining what success, freedom, meaning, and happiness truly are for you. And the most beautiful truth is this: you don't need anyone's permission to begin. You don't need any panel of approval to continue. You don't need an invitation from life to step forward and declare, "I will live my way, and I will live with responsibility for every moment I'm given." True success is not a sudden explosion. It is the accumulation of right choices repeated again and again, even when no one is watching, even when there is no guarantee of reward, but you still do it. Because you've realized that living well isn't about being recognized. It's about being able to look yourself in the mirror each day without shame. You don't need recognition. You only need the quiet peace within. And that no one can give you except yourself. The world may admire you for a moment, then forget you the next. But you will live with yourself for the rest of your life. And the only thing that will last forever is how you lived, how you thought, how you stayed true, how you chose. Remember, you don't need to be fast. You need to be steady. You don't need to travel far in a single day. Just walk the right direction each day. You don't need to succeed massively. Just live deeply. What you build today, whether it's a small habit, a humble discipline, or a quiet commitment, is already shaping a better version of you in the future. And if you live that way long enough, you'll stop asking if you're successful, because you'll already be living as someone truly successful. A person with inner strength, with clarity, with ownership of every step, with a calm, not because of external conditions, but because of internal order. You are not a victim of circumstance. You are the architect of your reality. And if something isn't right yet, remember, you can rebuild it, bit by bit, step by step, through small, repeated actions carried out with clear purpose and a steadfast heart. You are not limited by your past. You are not defined by your mistakes. You are only bound if you stop choosing. Every morning, life hands you a blank page, places the pen in your hand again, and asks, what do you want to write today? And no matter what happened yesterday, chaos, confusion, or disappointment, today is still your chance to begin anew, with fresh belief, with deeper understanding, with stronger resolve. Don't measure your journey by someone else's speed. Look at the depth you're creating. Don't compare yourself to others. Compare who you are today to who you were yesterday. Don't search for answers in the outer world. Listen to what you've always known inside, because deep within you is a bright voice, just waiting for you to be quiet enough to hear it, brave enough to follow it, and persistent enough not to give up. And when you begin to live from that voice, nothing is impossible. You don't need to be better than anyone else. You only need to become a better version of yourself each day. You don't need to be inspired. You need to start acting. You don't need to wait for more motivation. You need to make a decision. You don't need anyone to remind you to live with purpose, because deep down, you already know. You were not born just to survive. You were born to create, to grow, to live meaningfully. And you are doing that. Right now, through every small action, every powerful decision, every time you refuse to quit when no one is watching. In the end, the simple truth is this: you have the right to rewrite your life. You can change the way you think, the way you live, the direction of your future. Without needing permission, you only need to rise. You only need to choose again. You only need to begin today with one small but steady step. And if you repeat that step long enough, consistently enough, and sincerely enough, you won't just change your outcomes, you'll change who you are. And when you change yourself, you change everything.